Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I like to, before I start the presentation, I like to clarify a couple of things. First is that I'm not going to be doing an historical survey. So it's not a historical critical study of the events that happened at the time of Imam Hasan and then Muawiya. So I'll be focusing on the Shia theology or Shia perspective. So you shouldn't expect an historical analysis. This is what I was tasked with. I'm going to try to present a brief explanation of the Shia understanding of this event of abdication of Imam Hasan. So this covers my clarification. And what is the abdication of Imam Hasan? According to the Shia or historical sources, it was the event that happened after the death of Imam Ali, and Imam Hassan's. There's a around 6 months period where Imam Hasan held the title of caliphate, but then he was forced into abdication, or he was voluntarily left his position in year 41. So why Imam Hasan was appointed or elected or selected for this position? When Imam Ali passed away, when he was assassinated, according to the Shias, that he passed this succession to him because of his outstanding qualities. He was the grandson of the Prophet. He's the only successor, the eldest successor. Of course, he had his brother Imam Hussein, and his lineage and his religious standing among the religious qualities, which was also praised by the Prophet. You know, there's literature, ahadith, and lots of other literature we have, both in Sunni and Shia literature, that he had outstanding religious merits. So because of these qualities, he was natural successor of Imam Ali. But Muawiya, of course, he wasn't in this. He didn't have this opinion, or he wasn't accepting this consensus. Okay, from the Shia perspective, it was a consensus. I should also mention that. So he challenged his authority, and he had an established army and more structured army. So he used his power and influence to force Imam Hasan into abdication. So this event created a kind of, I'll define it. I'm a bit cautious about this terminology, but let's for just the sake of speaking, I would say theological trauma, because according to the Shia theology, Imams were divinely appointed. And if this is the case, and it's a leadership of the Muslim community, is a religious, it's a right and duty for the Imams. So how could an Imam could give up on this leadership without a fight? And of course, this is one aspect. And also, Muawiya wasn't the most likable person for the Shias or for Muslims, in the sense that his father or his family fought against the Prophet fiercely. And because of that, their known enmity of this family to the religion. And if you look at Arabia, the dynamics were defined within the tribal alliances or family alliances. So it was a big deal for the Shias to come to terms with this fact. And it's often considered as a missed opportunity for Shias, because if he could only hold on to this leadership of Muslims, then it could be a more promising for the not Shias, but for the religion, because Shias believe that Imams taught the true form of religion, and by abdicating his position, Imam Hasan caused this problem. And because, when you look at from the historical perspective, he had a sizable army. This army was raised by Imam Ali, and he was planning to go and fight with Muawiya. So he had a sizable army. under his command, and people had already pledged allegiance to him in Iraq and in Hijaz. People were following him, and he had a precedent to fight. He could fight because his father, Imam Ali, fought against Muawiya, and there he fought against other companions of the Prophet who challenged him. So it was widely seen, not theologically from the Shia perspective, but from generally Islamic perspective, it was a missed opportunity. So how could we how did the Shias make a sense of this theological sense of the abdication? Because when we look at afterwards, there's Imam Hussein who didn't want to pledge allegiance to Yazid, and he paid a very, very hefty price for his challenge. I mean, I don't want to go into, of course, everybody knows what happened in Karbala. So how could we reconcile these issues? At one point, there is Imam Hasan who didn't fight, who had an army under his command, ready to fight, and then he didn't fight, but his father fought against Muawiya, and his younger brother fought against Muawiya, but he didn't. So there are two reactions, two approaches within the Shia community. One is that it was a group of Muslims, and still I think there is when you in the community this view is there. They just explain it simply that it was God's will. It was just like God's will that forced Imam Hasan to make peace with Muawiya, and it was God's will for Imam Hussein to sacrifice himself. So it was just this explaining in a simple terms. But of course, Shia theologians are much sophisticated than this, and they came up with this idea of looking at the historical context of the events and placing it in a framework of people's unrelenting betrayal of the cause of God and the Imams. So they try to reconcile these two extreme reactions, that on the one side, Imam Hasan gives up on caliphate, leadership of Muslims, despite his divine right and duty, without any fight, so he abdicated. And then on the other hand, Imam Hussein had he made a point with his blood against oppression. So how could we reconcile? I'm using the term extreme here, but there's nothing extreme at the time. When we look at from this, this time, it might seem extreme, but there's no precedent. So nothing is extreme or nothing is normal. But when we look at from this today, it might seem an extreme. So there are two ways to explain this from the Shia theological point of view. One is that Imams acted according to the two dynamics or two elements. That first, of course, it was their divine right, and God, gave this duty and rights, but this was dependent on that. There was a condition to meet. There are two conditions to be met. One condition is a pledge or support of the community. So as far as Imam's concerned, there was no point of declaring Imam's claim to political leadership unless the community explicitly expressed their readiness to make a stand in their support of their claim. And then the second point or second element, that the interest or maslahah of Islam. So Imams wouldn't take wouldn't impose themselves on the community as the leadership unless they come to them and ask for the leadership. But then Imams could act on their own initiative when they see that there is an imminent danger to the divine message or to Islam. So this could cause anomaly, or this could go against the tradition. So this is where Imam Hussein's uprising could be placed. And I'll inshallah more delve into it. So how do we, I'm just going explaining those two elements in more detail, that argument of free will, because Imams didn't want to impose themselves on the people. They expected people to make their own choice, and based on this choice, pledge allegiance to them, an absolute allegiance, not conditional. And this is the one reason that Imam Hasan refused to accept the allegiance of Khawarij, because Khawarij gave them conditional allegiance because their condition was that he fights against Muawiya. So there must be that free will component of free will, because God is, everything is about this world is free will. And this is for this, because of free will, we are on trial, and based on this, our actions, we will be judged on the day of judgment. And this is the verse. I'm not going to read the verse, the verse for you, because I don't have time for it, but I'm sure you read it while I'm talking. This next slide. And then, of course, they wouldn't take any action unless people come to them with their free will and make choice. But then there are times that they could take these action. And when they see that this is also based on God's actions in this world, that God never interferes with our actions. There are oppressions going on. There are all kinds of events that are happening to people, but he never interferes. And people are allowed to do everything they want to do in this world. And actually, not just God allows them, he actually gives them sustenance. Even the worst enemies of Islam, they get their all sustenance from God Almighty. So he lets us to do things unless the whole society, decides to go astray, or they make the collective decision of corrupting the faith or corrupting the world. In that sense, of course, God comes in and then he interferes. Of course, when he interferes, he destroys everything, and then whole wipes out the entire generations. So this is what the Imams do when they see that the religion is going to go to astray. The message, whole work of the Prophet Muhammad, there's a danger of his work going into astray. He took an action, but this action that materialized in Karbala. But other than that, if this is, of course, I don't want to go into too much into detail, talk about what happened in Karbala, but what Yazid did was, or what Yazid's personality was much different than Muawiya, in the sense that he was openly infringing the Islamic law and making all kinds of un-Islamic interferences. So Imam Hussein saw that danger, that he could corrupt the whole message in such an early nascent period. But for Imam Hasan, there was no such a danger, because Muawiya was of course, whatever was going on inside him, he was a Sharia-abiding individual. He was, practicing Muslim. So these are two different situations. So again, going back to the Imam Hassan's position, it would be like Imam Hassan it was the failure for him to impose himself, or Imams to Muslim community, because even God doesn't impose himself on the people, his will. He lets people to do anything they want. And also Imams do not consider that the leadership, or the political leadership at least, is a essential importance. Imam Ali is saying, it's a famous saying in the Nahj al-Balagha, that the caliphate is more trivial than my old shoes, unless I restore right or redress a wrong. So there's a purpose for having that position. It's to help the community, help the overcome injustice and bring equality. So if the people don't want to do it they don't want justice, then how could an imam could just go there and then you have to follow me and I'll bring you justice? So they did not want to put themselves into this situation. And there is the verse. Okay, now this was the theological explanation, that because for Imam Hasan, people did not pledge allegiance. People pledged allegiance to him, but they did not fight. And it wasn't a conditional allegiance. It was conditional allegiance. They did not follow his orders. And there was no imminent danger to religion. So there was maslahah of Islam was not under danger, imminent danger. So Muawiya was still practicing Muslim, and he was a Sharia abiding person. There was no danger of destroying the message of Prophet. But so that's for that reason he chose to abdicate and make a peaceful resolution. But because people did not follow his orders, and because he knew that he couldn't fight against Muawiya without the support of people, and there was no imminent danger to Islam. So, and how do Shias justify this position? Is because Imam Ali, there's a historical side of it, and this is what happened according to the Shia sources. When Imam Ali realized that he was going to die, he entrusted, he passed the succession to Imam Hasan, because the Prophet Muhammad had told him, and he gave him the instructions. And then when Imam Hasan took this position, and then Imam Ali passed away, people pledged allegiance to him. And not only Kufa, people in Iraq and elsewhere, aside from Syria, people were following him. But then Kufa wasn't a stable city, and it was a garrison city. It was made up of bringing together different tribes and different people, Muslims, or Mawali, or the converts. So it was like a kind of melting pot of Islam from different regions. People were together, and they didn't have a very strong tradition, and they were also, of course, had their own interest. And according to the Shia sources, they divide these groups into three: the supporters of Muawiya, and the Khawarij, and then the non-committed. So although it seemed to be they're all sporting Imam Hasan, but majority of them did not support Imam Hasan. He had only a handful loyal followers. And this is what we understand from Imam Ali's sermon that he delivered to Kufa when they refused to fight against Muawiya, because he was willing to fight against Muawiya, but they would always come up with excuses because they had divisions. And Muawiya knew he was a master politician, and he could manipulate and exploit these divisions, and he had a very strong supporters in the Kufa. But then nevertheless, it went into confrontation, and Imam Hasan wrote the first letter to Muawiya, and I'm just quoted here one sentence that shows the Imam Hasan's position from the beginning. He wanted the position. Once people pledged allegiance to him, it became religiously compulsory upon him to claim his right. And then for this reason, he made this he made his position clear, and then his will to fight against Muawiya from the beginning. This is his first letter. Of course, these letters are not, we don't know about historical accuracy of these letters, but this is what it is, and Shias believe in it. And then, of course, this letter includes that his position, his standing, his merits, religious and lineage, to Muawiya. And then, of course, Muawiya can't use this Abu Sufyan argument. He would come up with the arguments of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and their priority over Ali, Imam Ali. So this was the initial discussion between the two opponents.
Doctor, you have a couple of moments left.
Yes, I'm checking also my time here. So
I have actually
two more slides, I think. So there were two events, of course. While there was this conversation happening behind the back, Muawiya was working with the propaganda activities, and the first very important development was that Imam Hasan's the vanguard, the leader of the commander of the vanguard detachment, turned against Imam Hasan. So Ubaidullah ibn Abbas was he turned against Imam Hasan, and then joined Muawiya's army with 8,000. He had around 20,000 soldiers, so 8,000 of his fighters went to Imam Muawiya's side. And then, of course, there's another development that showed Imam Hasan the betrayal, that some of the leaders of Kufa had written letters to Muawiya during this confrontation, and they all pledged allegiance to Muawiya, and Muawiya forwarded these letters to Imam Hasan. So Imam Hasan realized that his army is not willing to fight, and they are all traitors. Most of them, of course, there were a handful supporters. So, and then the treaty came, and of course there were negotiations and between the two sides, and then finally Imam Muawiya offered Imam Hasan 1 million dirhams annually, and then collection of the taxes of the two regions, and then Imam Hasan could send his own tax collector, and then in return Muawiya offered that upon his death Imam Hasan would become the caliph, and Muawiya would grant safety to people who pledge allegiance to Imam Hasan. Finally, he would act according to the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet. This is very important. This is what, if you put in the theological context that I explained, so long as Muawiya observed these, Quran and Sunnah, there was no fight for him there was no reason for Imam Hasan to fight against Muawiya, because people didn't support him. And of course, this argument that always presented against him, he was greedy in terms of, Imam Hasan was greedy, that's why he accepted 1 million and then surrender. But then Imam Hasan's response is clear here, and it's rationally that if he was after power, he could get, he could fight, try his luck against Muawiya, and then maybe he could get more. And yes, this is I think this is my time is up, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.